It is written, man shall not live on bread alone, but on every word that comes from the mouth of God. Love the Lord your God with all your heart, and with all your soul, and with all your mind. This is the first and greatest commandment, and the second is, love your neighbor as yourself. All the law and the prophets hang on these two commandments.
Hello everyone, Sidney St. James, and today I will be broadcasting my Mother's Day special. And the one thing I did before I was going to put the whole thing together was I wanted to check who all celebrated this particular day. And there are many, many countries. Then I started to look and I said, I've got to thank all my new subscriptions, all my new listeners from around the world. So here are just a few of the countries that have joined my show, and I want to send a special thank you out for tuning in. Ireland, Germany, the Netherlands and Canada, UK, Mauritania, the Philippines, and yes, where my brother-in-law lives in Australia, and India, Malaysia, Portugal, and Sudan. Thank you so much for your subscription to my show, and I appreciate you tuning in and following the broadcast. So now, let's get on with our Mother's Day special, and to all my friends here in America, thank you so much for tuning in. Hello everyone, Sidney St. James with you today on a day that probably means more to me than Christmas or even Easter. It's Mother's Day, and 50 years ago I got a telephone call from my Aunt Lexi in Mansfield, Louisiana. She said, Sidney, I hate to tell you this, but your mother, Dorothy, she has died. What makes this even more sad is that my mother and father got a divorce 5 years earlier. She moved back to Louisiana, and I was down in Eagle Lake, Texas, and real busy schedule growing up and going to college and all, and I probably didn't talk to her but 2 times in 5 years. I felt so guilty. But I made a turning point that particular day when I went to the funeral, and I told her there'd be 2 times a year that I promised her I would always talk to her. One was on her birthday, which is at the 1st of December, and the other was on Mother's Day. It meant so much to her, Mother's Day did, and also to my grandmother, her mother, the Reverend Ada Slayton Bonds. So today, it's that time of year when we stop, all of us, and pay honor to the first woman we ever loved, our mothers. Moms are superheroes, aren't they? They're our greatest American hero. They do it all. No matter how difficult life gets, moms have a way of making everything better. As many of you probably already know, my mother is definitely now gone to heaven, and I've discussed her on other broadcasts. I even nicknamed her one time the Queen of the House. My mom could light up a room with her broad smile. She raised me to love the Lord and be tough, so when I came up against hurdles and fell, I could get back up, brush myself off, and keep on with my race. I could count on my mom for anything, and she had the best sense of humor, which I am so happy I inherited. My mother, Dorothy Maureen Slatan Strusss, is no longer with us, but every year on Mother's Day, I can't help but think about her and all the fun times growing up with her in my mind and my heart. From planting tulips outside around the house, to the blue lily of the Nile in various places of the yard. Yes, everyone, today is Mother's Day, and I would like to open up with a passage about Mother's Day found on page 313 in my novel, Faith 70 times 7. Again, thanks for joining me on this special day as we all celebrate our mothers and our stepmothers, past and present. Before I begin my reading, I should let you know a few paragraphs earlier, there were members of the Ku Klux Klan number 60 who were present at one of Ada's Mother's Day services. And yes, each of them had mothers too. They presented Ada with a check for the tithes and offerings and a message that said, "We support you, Miss Ada, who represents pure womanhood." And now, on the bottom of page 313, the warm clarity of Ada's voice stretched through the congregation, and she gave the opening prayer for the day's celebration. Her compassionate heart expressed itself in a continuous flow of tears. Ada prayed with the churchgoers as her preaching this morning was more with the worshipers than to them. All the difficulties of her own life seemed to merge with the sorrows of her congregation as she proclaimed the infinite love of God and the unsearchable riches of His grace. Ada smiled. She opened her Bible. Good morning, everyone. It is nice to see you today as we celebrate Mother's Day, a tribute and memorial to all those who've moved on and a homecoming as well. Thank you to the sons and daughters and their families who were once affiliates of the church or to whose parents are members for coming from far and near to honor our mothers and make new friends. At that time, Ada glanced down right at her son, Sidney Slayton. He looks up at her. No one could read his thoughts, but he says, "Oops, Mom must have seen me talking to Bobby Jean." Not in the book, but this was the girl that Sidney, my mother's brother, fell in love with and married. He also became a minister. Then Ada continued, "And to many of you who are here today and renewing old acquaintances. While walking over to my family's gravesite, I noticed that many flowers were spread over the cemetery upon the graves of loved ones. The blossoms are such a beautiful and moving memorial to these many family members and friends. Unfortunately, they are no longer with us in physical form, but they are with us all in our hearts. Ada reached up, placed her hand with a handkerchief up against her heart. She wore a white carnation on her dress. Many in the congregation were wearing either a red or a white carnation. Little Dorothy, my mother, leaned over in the direction of her cousin, Gwendolyn Geewan, with a blank look, a slack expression. Gwen, do you know what the different color carnations mean that everyone's wearing? Gwen bent over in Dot's direction as she was just a few years older than her. Her smile broadened. Dot, the flowers are being worn to demonstrate everyone's love for their mothers. If they're white, their mother has passed away and is no longer with us. If they are red, like yours and mine, it means our mothers are still alive. Dorothy gazed around the room. Tears began to blind her eyes, and in a choking voice she again discussed her sadness with her cousin, Gwen. Oh, there are so many white ones. This is so sad. Her eyes shifted to the side again and became further glazed with a glossy layer of tears. They dripped down from her eyelids and slid down her cheeks as she blinked. She bit her lip tightly to hide any sound that wanted to escape from her mouth. Her heart sank down further. Dot, those flowers, they're not meant to cause sadness. Instead, they are a remembrance as we honor our mothers with our fond memories of a time gone by. Gwen couldn't help it but be moved by the emotion that was shown by Dorothy. She, too, was responsive, with tears glistening on her pale, heart-shaped face. There was a pause in Ada's delivery, and the congregation quiet in anticipation of Ada's emphatic message. The scripture reading today is from John, chapter 14. Let not your heart be troubled. Ye believe in God, also believe in me. In my Father's house are many mansions. If it were not so, I would have told you so. But I go now to prepare a place for you. And if I go and prepare a place for you, I will come again and receive you until myself, that where I am, there ye may also be. She paused a moment, looked over the congregation, and continued. Do you always get up on the right side of the bed in the morning? Ada paused for a moment and gazed directly into the eyes of one of the attentive worshipers. I could go on with this because as she continued, will have you laughing and rolling on the floor the stories she tells in the church. It was a very upbeat message on that particular Mother's Day. A mother's love is unreserved. Now back to the memories of my mother. A mother's love is unreserved. My mother's love was like glue that kept us together. I simply couldn't imagine life without my mom when I was young. Although I must admit that I experienced an awkward, rebellious phase during my teenage years because I thought my mom was so embarrassing sometimes. Sometimes I thought of her as a big old meanie. But as I grew up, I slowly realized that my mother was really my very best friend, with only my best interest at heart. Let's face it, everyone. When growing up, our mothers are the ones we call for in triumph and sorrow. When we grow up, we realize there's truth in the phrase, Mom really does know best. Think about it. Think about it for just one moment. Aren't there countless times in your life when you needed your mother and no one else could take her place? While flowers and chocolates are perfectly suitable for saying thank you to your mom, I realize my actions and notable words meant the most to her. So, while I'll never be able to count the myriad of blessings she gave me, here are 5 reasons I learned we should tell our moms we love them this Mother's Day. And if you are like me, and if she is with God in heaven, take just a private moment. Look up at the sky, or at the ceiling if you're inside your home, and tell Mom, Mom, I love you. She can hear you, you know. But before we do, let's just hear a few words from my sponsor, because I've always got to do it. Sorry to break this podcast in two, but after they get through, it's only 30 seconds, and I'll be right back with the rest of my Mother's Day special. Have you heard about Anchor.fm by Spotify? It's the easiest way to make a podcast with everything you need all in one place. Yep, Anchor has the tools that will allow you to record and edit your podcast right from your phone or your computer. And best of all, Anchor is totally free. Download the Anchor app or go to Anchor.fm to get started. And now, the rest of my story. The 5 things you can tell your mother here or up there that we love them are. As I spoke about at the beginning of my podcast, my mother is the greatest American hero, like one of those I spoke of in episode 9. Mothers are the embodiment of resilience. Each time life knocked my mother down, she returned more robust than ever before. Once Jimmy Thomas and his wife Evelyn were double dating with my father and mother, and they were driving out near the Colorado River, where they ran into on a dark night, moonless also, but there was a big old black cow. They couldn't avoid it, and my mother hit the windshield rather hard. Many over the years forgot about this incident, except my mother had a difficult time for many, many years after that. Rather than allowing the accident or failure to overcome it and drain her resolve, she always managed to find a way to stand up tall from the ashes. My mother taught me to embody a brilliant strength throughout my journey in life. She educated me on one of the most valued life lessons, to love ourselves. That's right. My mom helped me discover what we wanted to do in this world, and when we made that discovery, she was right there by my side, cheering me along with all lots of integrity and hope. Even if her words came from heaven itself when I was in my 20s, they were still there. Yep, my mom was a superhero. Another one I want to talk about is how mothers always give us guidance throughout life. My first and my second mother, Frances Marie. My mother's passion and her commitment to our family were genuinely inspiring. Her unconditional love was the foundation for our entire family. The strength of my mother's love could move mountains. She taught me to be the bigger person, have compassion for everyone, rise above all, and be my own source of strength. Did you ever watch mom care for a sick child or their spouse or our father? I watch my wife now as she is the mother of my children, and just like my mother, take care of my children, take care of the grandchildren, and let's not forget at all, take care of me. But she does it with grace and dignity, just like my mother did Daryl, Warren, John, and me. Any mother, not just mine, who is engrossed in caregiving for an ill loved one is the pure description of strength and courage while encircled by despair and human suffering. Our dear mothers show us what bravery means by selflessly putting their needs aside to tend to us. So, listeners, friends, family, on this Mother's Day, go. Thank your own mom for motivating you, for teaching you the sky is the limit, and that the word impossible is only that, a word. Another reason why I love my mother was that my mother was always there when I needed her most. My mom was pretty doggone amazing. She put up with my absurd shenanigans, like seeing what would happen if I struck a match and lit the bottom of one of the linen curtains in the bedroom. I know. I don't know why I did, but I did, except maybe I was only 6 years old. And she did it with a broad smile and zero judgment. She stood by the sidelines at the Eagle Lake Junior High football game when we played a small town called Sheridan, Texas. She was always there. This time, when we lost the big game, or waiting with the box office of Kleenex after my first big breakup, or racing to the emergency room when I fell off my older brother's motor scooter. It was a Cushman scooter with Danny Moshak riding on the back. Sometimes it's not the magnificent gestures that made my mom special, but the little words of encouragement that meant the most. My mother was the one who constantly whispered, "You can do it. Sidney, you can do it." Even when the wind was in my final lap of the mile run and I just ran out of steam and couldn't possibly continue. She is and was the motivator who was there to guard my aspirations. Our mothers genuinely believe we are the most beautiful creatures on this planet Earth, even when we are at the most awkward stages of our life. My mother's unconditional love and guidance enabled me to see the strength and the ability in others. Oh, my mother's love, it was simply incomparable. My mother and stepmother taught us boys, Daryl, Warren, and John and I, every emotion, every happiness, sadness, fear, and love, every anger, helplessness, compassion, excitement, joy, and sorrow, hoping and praying that we would only experience the good things in life. My mother is the place I came from. My mother was my first home. She was the guiding light that called me to shore during the darkness of a storm. My mother, yes, my mother was my first friend. Perhaps even my first enemy, but as I grew older and more mature, I realized that my mom was, in fact, my best friend and my biggest fan in life. with only my best interest at heart. The strongest love is a mother's love. Nothing at all on earth can separate me from my mother. Not time, not space, and yes, not even death. A mother's love is unconditional and precious and timeless. The heart of a mother is that of a rare jewel. And one of the last reasons, let me mention, is that my mother gave our family all she had, and then more. One of the most generous gifts my mother gave our family was her time and undivided attention. My mother made countless sacrifices. She gave up her privacy and alone time to make sure we brothers were thriving. She gave up a carefree lifestyle to make sure we boys were fed, comforted, and happy. With endless love and guidance, my mother taught us to say what was in our hearts. She allowed us to be vulnerable and to embrace risk. My mother taught us to love a world that barely knows what it means to love itself. All of our mother's love and guidance helped us all pursue life with integrity and with hope. Our moms are the ones beaming with pride, cheering from the sidelines when our dreams become a reality. Our mothers are the ones who sometimes delay their own dreams with the hopes of us achieving ours first. It's important to tell our mothers we love them today, more so than ever, and respect them every single chance we get, not just on Mother's Day. A mother's love is endless. It's self-sacrifice, it's devotion, and it's commitment that will remain in our hearts forever and ever, forging the character of the next generation. A mother's unconditional love has painted the canvas of our lives with soft brushstrokes of patience and brushstrokes of sacrifice and more brushstrokes of tenderness. When I finish my podcast today, I will look up to the heavens and know that my mom is looking down on me, still very proud of my brothers and me. I will finish now talking with her and say this: Mom, only a mother as perfect as you could have a loving son as perfect as me. Happy Mother's Day, Mom. And just because I'm so perfect, I found the perfect song I would like you to hear on this Mother's Day. It is called Nothing More Than Thank You, Mom.
Well, that does it for me for another great episode from Sidney St. James. Be sure to click on the tab above that says send a voice message, and I will get it from you, and I'll probably play it back on one of my future podcasts. Also, don't forget to click the button follow. I'd love for you to follow my podcast. But it's been fun. I hope you enjoyed this episode. And until next time, here I am, Sidney St. James. Happy listening.